This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, you wrote an excellent piece in Democracy Docket about the dangers of a second Trump presidency. So, as the country's premier voting rights attorney, what is the most insidious action that he's promised that worries you the most?
So everything about Donald Trump worries me. I am more worried every day. I am more worried today than I was when he ran in 2016. I'm more worried today than I was even on the eve of January 6th and in the wake of January 6th, because Donald Trump right now is both becoming more extreme himself. The Republican Party has become more extreme, and he is cornered. He's cornered by these four indictments. He's cornered by the real prospect that he will go to prison. We talk about these criminal cases, but these criminal cases have consequences. It's not a joke. It's not, paying money. It's about going to prison. And so he will do anything to retain power. And if he is in power, he will do anything. I mean, things that are unimaginable to people right now in the way in which he governs this country. So what worries me the most is actually not what he's going to do, but what we're going to do. Are we going to rally together and have enough energy and enough intensity to make sure that he doesn't come to power? Because that's the thing we can control.
The very day that you published your piece on Democracy Docket, Donald Trump made the comment that he plans to be dictator, but only for a day. Can you talk about your reaction to that comment and just how unusual language like this is in a democratic society?
It's not just unprecedented, it is chilling. It's bone chilling. In fact, in some countries, that alone would be enough to disqualify you from running for office.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Section 14, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which is the litigation in Colorado and elsewhere to try to disqualify him for what he did on January 6th and in the run-up to January 6th. We've talked about the criminal cases, about what he did in the past. He is telling us he will be a dictator if he is elected. And who really believes that if he is a dictator on day one, at midnight on day one, he'll be like, yeah, the dictator thing's not for me.
Right.
I've decided I'm no longer a dictator. He has said what he is going to be, and we need to believe him. And so it is not just unusual. It is not just dangerous, but I think that as a whole, the elements of the media and the judicial system are simply not treating seriously enough the absolute threat that he poses.
Liz Cheney had come out recently and said that she believes if Trump takes office that he won't leave. Do you share that opinion?
I do. I do. And for people who say, well, but how would that happen? I mean, there are any number of ways it could happen. I mean, the first is, I say in the piece, and others have written about this as well, I think he's going to institute the Insurrection Act, which, he will say, and I'm not here to agree with him, by the way, because I don't, but he will say that allows him to take over the U.S. military and have the U.S. military operate domestically,
Yeah.
deploying troops in cities. Number one. Number two, who believes that given the opportunity to run the federal government, not only will he prosecute his enemies, I mean, that, I think he has said and over again,
Yeah.
but who believes he will not take over the election systems in this country? He will use the military, the FBI, the federal DOJ to do the kinds of things that we know he talked about doing in 2020, seizing voting equipment, declaring that ballots no longer get counted. And so, of course he's not going to leave power. Now, will he do the thing that is, point A to point B, which is that he just continues to run for office? Maybe. Or maybe he does the thing that Vladimir Putin did. Remember Russia had term limits. So what did he do? He handpicked a puppet and he switched offices and he put his puppet in the office he was in and then switched all the power to the new office that he was in. Maybe he'll say Don Jr. is now the candidate and he'll rig the election for Don Jr. But Donald Trump is not going to give up power. And he's not going to stop undermining democracy.
What has changed from 2020 to 2024 that may help him now where he previously failed?
So, Brian, I think that three things have happened since 2020 that are just so discouraging. And we can talk about optimistic things too, but these are the discouraging things. These are the things that I worry about. These are the reasons why I wrote this piece. It's the thing that keeps me up at night. Number one, I am worried that we have become accustomed to it. And so that the shock value has gotten taken out of it. Things that he says now, people kind of roll their eyes at. I think Mitt Romney discounted, for example, what he said about being dictator, saying, oh, he's just rallying his base. Like, you know what I mean? So that worries me. The second is that I am very worried that the system is not going to hold. The system is under so much pressure. And what do I mean by the system? I mean the system of elections. I mean the judicial system. I mean the civic and civil society systems. All of them are constantly being pounded on by this guy. They're pushing bad people into offices, and good people are retiring in the elections administration. People are retiring from office, not running for office. People are not wanting to speak out because they don't want to be demonized. The social media platforms have become toxic. There's just the systems that we count on for democracy are weakened. And then the final thing is, and I cannot say this loudly enough. The Republican Party is now not just a party of enablers, but they are a co-venture in this effort. Whatever resistance there was within the Republican Party or hesitation in 2016 was gone by 2020. But in 2020, there were still, remember the op-eds and the editorials and the statements after the election? Oh, he's just getting this out of his system. He'll concede, he'll go along with being gracious in the transfer of power. Remember how many Republicans claimed to be appalled by January 6th? What are they doing now? The Speaker of the House is releasing video and they're blurring images of the insurrectionists because the Republican Party speaker doesn't want the insurrectionists prosecuted anymore. The Republican Party are co-conspirators with Donald Trump. And that just is a much, much bigger threat because it's not one guy. It's actually all of the apparatus of the Republican Party now is in favor of dictatorship.
Well, on a more optimistic note, what are we better prepared for that we weren't prepared for in 2020?
So look, I think the optimistic case boils down to two things. The first is people like you, people like me, but a lot of you, people like Liz Cheney, Jen Rubin. I mean, I don't want to list some and then others be like, what about me? What about me? There are a lot of people who are now sounding this alarm and are very clear-eyed. So to some extent, 2020, January 6, 2021, was also a wake-up call on the left and in the center and in those civil societies and in the media that we cannot assume that there will not be this incredibly terrible reaction. So that is something that makes us a lot more prepared.
Now, talk about the prospect of a third-party candidate and whether you think there's any way that a third-party candidate could actually help Joe Biden.
Okay, so I just got to speak directly to your audience because I imagine your audience is a lot of good Democrats, but also people who have very high standards for their elected officials. And let me just tell you something. If you think voting for Jill Stein is doing anything other than electing Donald Trump, you are wrong. If you vote for Jill Stein, you're voting for Donald Trump. If you vote for Bobby Kennedy, you are voting for Donald Trump. If you vote for the no labels candidate, whoever he or she is, I don't even care. I don't even want to know. Don't spare me. Spare me it's going to be a Democrat or a Republican or Joe Manchin or this person. If you vote for the no labels candidate, you are voting for Donald Trump. And I'll tell you one more thing. If you sit at home because you're disappointed, or you sit at home because you think your vote doesn't matter, or you sit at home for whatever reason and you don't vote, you're helping elect Donald Trump. So, I'm tired of the people who are saying I'm going to have a protest or I'm going to sit out or, we're disappointed because the Supreme Court, struck down the student loan. Joe Biden fought for student loan relief. Joe Biden has fought for more things than he's given credit for. But even if those were aside, if you don't participate in this election and enthusiastically drag your friends, your neighbors, your family, drag them to the polls, make sure they're registered, drag them to the polls and make sure they vote, then you are feeding into what Donald Trump wants for this country, which is a dictatorship.
Perfectly put. We'll leave it there. I think that it couldn't have been said any better. I would also remind people, if you haven't read this piece in Democracy Docket, I'll put the link to Democracy Docket, to that piece right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. And if you're not signed up for Democracy Docket, definitely make sure to sign up. It's, again, that free news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting and elections. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.